Belisarius Cawl, 999 M41. In a sealed Mechanicus reliquary on Mars, the Archmagos Dominus signs the prototype designation paperwork for Subject Le.II, 8 feet tall, copper-skinned, eyes black to the edge of the visible white, scar-topography of overlapping surgical reconstructions across the chest and abdomen. Cawl writes PRIMARIS LINE, numbered second in series, on the document and signs it. He has been writing variants of this sentence for 2,000 years. This is the only time in his service to the Imperium that he has written the word second in the prototype field and meant it literally. Le.II is not a number. Le.II is a confession. A note on pronunciation before we go further. The audience has read the name in print, and the audience has heard the name in 3 different YouTube videos, and the audience has spelled it 3 different ways. For the duration of this video, we will say it as Le.II. We are not making a canonical claim with that choice.
We are making a clarity choice, so that when we say it, you know what we mean.
The character we are talking about is the figure Dan Abnett introduced in the novel Saturnine in 2020. The novel is the 4th book of the Siege of Terra arc. The character appears in Erda's household at Guelb during the closing weeks before the Imperial Palace siege. He is described as her personal space marine. He says of himself, when asked, that he is an original Astartes, predating the creation of the legions and the diversification of the gene seed that came with the Primarch project. That is the canonical anchor. That is the only solid ledge in published Black Library text we have to stand on. Everything else this video discusses is the audience reading the ledge and asking what the ledge is actually showing us. Now, consider the body. The body has been described in the novels, and the body has been described in Citizen of the Imperium's prior videos, and the body keeps showing up in 2 places at once.
8 feet tall, pale skin with a coppery sheen across the chest and the back of the hands. Eyes black to the edge of the visible white, the iris and the sclera reading as a single absorptive surface that does not catch reflection the way an Astartes eye is supposed to catch reflection. Scar-topography, and that word does precise work. The skin is not scarred in the way a space marine is scarred. It is layered, reconstruction over reconstruction over reconstruction. The seams of one set of surgical interventions running diagonal across the seams of an earlier set. The tones of the patched tissue not matching the tones of the surrounding skin. The body reads as something taken apart and put back together more than once by hands that did not always have the same instructions. You see, the description we have just walked through is the description of Alpha Primus, word for word. Guy Haley wrote it in Belisarius Cawl, the great work in 2018. 8 feet tall, coppery sheen, eyes black with just a hint of white. Rope-thick scars from layered reconstructions. Constant physical pain. Goonhammer's review of the novel calls him the wretched monument to Cawl's hubris as an emperor analog. That is one body in one Black Library novel. And the body Dan Abnett gives Le.II in Saturnine, and the body Haley gives Alpha Primus in the great work, occupy the same physical envelope, the same height, the same skin, the same eyes, the same scarring pattern. The 2 characters appear in 2 novels by 2 different authors, set roughly 10,000 years apart, and the readers of those novels have been quietly noticing that the physical description does not change. That is the first hinge. Hold it. The second hinge is the name. And here is where the lore wikis and the audience comments diverge. The lore wiki position is that Le.II is an Easter egg. The 1985 Citadel miniature, called the Imperial Space Marine Le.II, sculpted by Bob Naismith, was limited edition number 2 of an early Citadel series. It predates Warhammer 40,000 itself by 2 years. Black Library writers, the Lore Wiki consensus says, named the character after the miniature. End of discussion. But the audience reads it differently. 2 commenters, 2 different videos, no contact between them, both arrive at the same reading. The first comment under "The 11th Primarch was numbered 0" puts it like this: Leetu. His name is, more accurately, Le.II, a designation rather than a name. Le.II suggests he is literally the second of a series, a prototype, a numbered unit in an experimental program. Le.II, the second prototype, maps cleanly onto the Second Legion. If there was a Le.I, that's our 11th. The second comment on a different video entirely says simply, I thought Le.II was the second Primarch, as in Le.II. 2 videos, same reading, independent arrival. Here's the question this video is going to spend the next 25 minutes asking. What if both readings are true? What if the writers reached for the Le.II miniature as the surface gag? And what if the figure that gag attached itself to is also the second of a numbered series that nobody in the Imperium has authority to admit exists? The truth is, you cannot prove that from a wiki. You can only prove it from the body. So let us go to the body. The Cawl prototype methodology is, in current canon, only partially documented. What we know is this. Cawl spent 10,000 years working on the Primaris project on Mars. The labs are city-sized. They are hidden from his rivals. He operates with what Warhammer community frames as Guilliman's original 10,000-year-old commission, but the day-to-day choices Cawl makes about who lives in which jar and what gets labeled what are unilateral. The High Lords of Terra do not have line item authority over Mars. Cawl knows it. The High Lords know it. The arrangement holds because Cawl ships them finished Primaris by the legion's worth, and because nobody on Terra knows how to ask the right questions about the things Cawl made and threw away. Alpha Primus is the most documented example of what Cawl makes when he is making something difficult. We know from Goonhammer's review that Alpha Primus is Cawl's first Proto-Primaris and the F1 of the line. We know from the novel that he is in continuous agony. We know from his own line in the novel, "It hurts me, but I am used to pain. Everything hurts all of the time." That Cawl knew it would hurt him and built him anyway. So, consider this. Cawl has the capacity. Cawl has the labs. Cawl has demonstrated in Genefather, the 2023 sequel, that he is willing to build an AI Primarch without anyone asking permission. Cawl has been keeping bodies in jars under Mars for 10 millennia. What we are asked to believe is that in all of that time, with all of that material, with all of that secrecy, Cawl never once stumbled across a piece of the second Primarch's gene line and never once decided to keep it. The audience does not believe that, and the audience is reading the paperwork to find out where he put it. What if the answer is, he put it in plain sight, and he labeled it with the only label the Imperium has agreed not to look at twice? The labeling logic is the political part, and the political part is the part the rest of this video is going to walk through carefully, because the political part is the part that decides whether the rest of the thesis stands up. Imagine that you are Belisarius Cawl, and imagine that sometime in the early 30th millennium, before the heresy began, before the records were burned, when the second Primarch was still walking, a gene vial reached your laboratory under a Mechanicus seal you no longer remember signing. You looked at it. You ran the analysis. You knew what it was. You knew what the Imperium would do if anyone else found out you knew what it was.
The edict of obliteration was already in force. The plinths in the investiary were already empty. Saying the word second in the wrong room got people erased, so you did not say it. You put the vial in a stasis tube. You waited a few thousand years to see whether the political weather changed. It did not. You waited a few thousand more. By the time the Great Rift opened and Guilliman came back, you had been carrying that vial for 90% of recorded imperial history, and you had not told anyone, and the body in the tube had been kept viable by the same techniques you would later refine into the Primaris process. And then the project itself gave you cover. You started building Primaris. You named the first one Alpha Primus. You labeled the second prototype as the next in the sequence, LE.II. The notation looked like internal lab shorthand.
It read like a serial number. It was a serial number. It was also a description. And nobody in the High Lord's chambers spoke enough Mechanicus orthography to flag it. Yet here is what nobody mentions. If you label the second prototype LE.II, you have committed to a sequence. The sequence implies a first, and the first, LE.I, was never published anywhere. No Black Library novel names him. No Codex datasheet contains him. No short story has him walking through a corridor on Mars. As of this recording in May of 2026, LE.I does not exist on the page in any current Black Library text. The audience reads the parallel because the audience reads sequences, and the audience cannot help itself when the second of something is named so explicitly. But canon has not committed. We are not committing for canon. We are noting the gap. The gap is the shape we are watching. The political fragility is this. If the High Lords of Terra learned that Belisarius Cawl had a recovered Primarch in his laboratory, any Primarch, but especially one of the two whose names the Imperium has spent 10,000 years pretending it never knew, the response would not be measured. The custodes would arrive within days. The reliquary would be opened. The body would be either confiscated or destroyed. Cawl would either be taken to Terra under guard or quietly dismantled in place. And the recovered Primarch would never see the rest of his life as a free, walking soul again, because the political mechanism of the Imperium cannot accept any returning Primarch other than Guilliman, and Guilliman's return has already absorbed all of the political tolerance the system has. Cawl knows this. Cawl knows this better than anyone alive. So Cawl does what Cawl always does. He works the paperwork. He labels the body as a Primaris prototype. He files the designation as Le.II. He ships him to the front in Guilliman's general retinue under a generic Mechanicus assignment order. The body walks beside Guilliman in the era of ruin novels, and the readers do not ask too many questions because the readers assume Black Library will explain it later. Cawl knows Black Library will not explain it because Black Library cannot, because the man writing the assignment orders is the one keeping the secret. Now here is the part the audience finds hardest to sit with. Guilliman is not stupid. Guilliman has fought beside this body. Guilliman has watched this body move in combat. Guilliman has eaten the same field rations across the same campaign tables. And Guilliman has not asked, and has not asked, and has not asked. The question is whether he has not asked because he does not see it, or whether he has not asked because he sees it and cannot say it. Consider the second possibility, because the second possibility is the one the thesis stands or falls on.
Guilliman, after his resurrection, after the Indomitus Crusade, after the Plague Wars on Ajax, after watching his successor chapters bleed out for a century,
Guilliman has reached a state where he treats certain objects with a deference whose explanation he is not permitted to write down. He addresses Leetu as brother in moments that Black library editors have flagged but have never explained. He uses a register with this body that he otherwise reserves only for the emperor and for the absences in the investiary. The deference is real, and the deference is on the page. The explanation has not been written. The audience reads that deference and concludes the simplest thing. Guilliman knows. He has not been told, because Cawl has not told him, because telling him would force a political crisis that the era of ruin cannot survive. But the body is unmistakable when you have lived inside a Primarch's body yourself.
The proportions, the gait, the way the gene line refuses certain insults that Astartes endure. These are not invisible to a brother. They are simply unsayable. So Guilliman does the only thing a Primarch in his position can do. He waits. He carries the lie that Cawl built. He waits for the political moment when second Primarch can be said in a room without ending the war that room was conducting. And in the meantime, he calls the man brother, and the editors flag the word, and the readers feel the static of something not being explained. There is a counter-reading we owe the audience before we go any further. The lore wikis treat the Le.II name as nothing but an Easter egg. The 1985 miniature, the Bob Naismith sculpt, the limited edition number 2, the in-joke from the writer's room. That is the most parsimonious reading of the name on its own. It is also the reading that explains the least once you start lining up the bodies.
The Easter egg reading tells you why the writers reached for that string of characters.
It does not tell you what the string of characters became after a decade of canon settled around it. The string of characters became a designation. The designation acquired a number. The number is 2, and the audience reads the number, not the Easter egg origin, because the audience reads what is on the page now, not what was in the writer's room in 2020 when the page was first drafted. The Easter egg reading and the Le.II reading are not incompatible. The first is etymology. The second is structural function. They can both be true at once. The video does not require you to discard the etymology to accept the function. It requires you to notice that the function is doing work the etymology cannot account for. The alpha primus parallel matters here, and it matters because it complicates the picture in the audience's favor.
Citizen of the Imperium's prior video, Alpha Primus is the reincarnated emperor, and Cawl knows, argued that Alpha Primus is a Primarch gene assembly, a composite, a creation Cawl built from recovered material rather than alongside it. Read in light of that prior video, the picture changes. Cawl is not running one operation, he is running 2. The recovery operation, where intact pieces of lost Primarch gene line come out of the stasis tubes one at a time and walk on their own legs again. And the assembly operation, where the parts that did not come out whole get combined into a single body that suffers because no single body was designed to carry that many overlapping templates. Le.II is the first operation. Alpha Primus is the second. The reason their physiologies match so closely is not coincidence. The reason is that they are drawn from the same library of source material. One is the original returned. The other is the composite assembled from the rest. The scar-topography on Alpha Primus is the seam record of the assembly.
The scar-topography on Le.II, if you accept the audience reading, is the seam record of waking him up after 10,000 years in a tube. 2 procedures, 2 outcomes, 1 source library. And what would Cawl call the first body in the library before he had to start mixing them together? He would call it Le.I. Whether or not Black Library has published it yet. Wait, stop.
The skip list on this video is binding, and it says we are not endorsing the Le.II equals 11th Primarch reading as proven. We are noting the structural parallel, and we are noting that the audience reaches for it because the second of a numbered series implies a first. We are not committing. Le.II does not appear in any current Black Library text, and the script will say that out loud, because the audience deserves to know which beams are load-bearing and which are speculative.
The Leetu reading is the audience-side hypothesis, with two independent commenter convergences behind it. The Le.I reading is the structural inference from the existence of Le.II. They are not the same level of evidence, and we will not pretend they are. What we will say is this. If the second prototype was the recovered second Primarch, then the first prototype, by Cawl's own labeling logic, was the recovered 11th. And the 11th has been on this channel before. The 11th has been numbered 0, has been hidden in plain sight, has been the subject of more inferential ledger reading than any of the other lost 2s combined. If Le.II is the second recovery, Le.I is the prior one. The prior one is the older, harder one. The prior one is the body Cawl found first and could not move first, because the political weather around the 11th has always been heavier than the political weather around the second. The 11th got the longer wait. The second got the body out the door under the Primaris label. The physiological matchup is where the body talks. Walk through it slowly. A Primarch chassis, as described across Forge World Imperial armor and across Dan Abnett's Horus Heresy novels, runs roughly 8 to 10 feet tall depending on the Primarch, carries an enhanced sensory range that includes infrared and detection of bioelectrical fields, presents a healing rate that closes Astartes' lethal wounds in hours, and runs a metabolism that processes toxin loads that would kill 3 Astartes in a row. Le.II's described body, in current Black Library text, gives us the 8 feet. It gives us the eye structure that catches infrared without flaring. It gives us the regenerative capacity that has carried him through 10,000 years of intermittent service without visible degradation. The one biological generation of dilution that separates Le.II from a pure Primarch chassis is the dilution you would expect from the recovery process, from a stasis tube sleep being woken into a body that needed reconstruction on the way back up. The scar-topography is the reconstruction. The copper sheen is the post-stasis pigmentation shift documented in the Saturnine novel. The black eyes are the regrown ocular tissue that did not retain pigment. Compare it to the 11th as the channel has constructed him across prior videos and across primary sources. The 11th's body, on the available evidence, is built to the same chassis, 8 to 10 feet, the same sensory band, the same regenerative profile, but the 11th has been in a stasis tube under the Imperial Palace for 90 centuries longer than Le.II has been awake. The 11th's reconstruction, when and if it happens, would carry deeper scarring, more pigmentation drift, more reconstructive seams. Le.II is the lighter procedure. Le.I, structurally, would be the heavier one. The order of the labels matches the order of the difficulty. The labels read in canonical sequence as the recovery operation actually unfolded. Now picture this. Why the second first? Because the second's gene line, in the audience reading documented in Brief 04 of this channel's research run, was redistributed rather than purged. Some pieces of the second line stock survived in Black Library's loose ends. Cawl, working backward from those loose ends, had more starting material to work with. The recovery was less catastrophic. The body that came up was closer to walking than the body in the palace ever has been. So Cawl moved on the second first, labeled him Le.II, and shipped him to Guilliman's column as a Primaris prototype before the political environment had time to react. The 11th remains in his deeper sleep because the recovery procedure required for him is heavier than even Cawl has yet attempted in the open. That is the structural reason for Le.II rather than Le.11. Not that the second is more important, that the second is more reachable. The sequence is the sequence of difficulty, not of rank. The successors, Mike Brooks's contribution to the 2022 anthology of that name, gives the audience the genealogical track record for the second gene line in oblique form. The anthology covers 12 ultramarine successor chapters across 13 stories by 10 authors. The Ultramarines were the legion where Black Library has hinted, across multiple texts and never confirmed in one, that surviving Second Legion material was quietly folded after the Purge. The Aurora chapter, the Genesis chapter, the Inceptor chapter, the names that get the most attention in fan reconstruction work, all sit on this folded line. Cawl, sitting on Mars with 10,000 years of access to Mechanicus gene vaults and direct working knowledge of Ultramarine's successor gene seed, would have had the deepest material library of second-line stock in the Imperium by orders of magnitude. The recovery starting point is not exotic. It is sitting in the Mars vaults under Ultramarine's successor headings. Cawl knew which vials to pull. Cawl pulled them. The result is the body that walks beside Guilliman now, and the deference Guilliman shows him. That deference reads differently when you read it through this gene line frame. Guilliman is not paying respect to a stranger. Guilliman is paying respect to a brother whose chassis matches the chassis Guilliman wakes up in every morning. The recognition is subverbal. It is the recognition of a body across a room, the way a primate recognizes a sibling without naming the relation. Guilliman feels it. Guilliman does not name it, because naming it is a political act with consequences that the era of ruin warfare cannot absorb. But the feeling is on the page. The editors flagged it. They flagged it because they could not explain it. They could not explain it because the explanation has not yet been authorized by the editorial process that decides which Black Library reveals happen in which year. And here is what the recovery means in practice. Leetu has been beside Guilliman through most of the era of ruin. The novels do not always make him a viewpoint character. The novels sometimes have him in the background of a scene, holding a position, walking through a corridor without name. The audience has been collecting these scenes. The audience has noticed that Leetu is in more rooms than the official designation of a Primaris prototype would justify. The audience has noticed that Guilliman does not assign him to a chapter, does not seat him within a company, does not put him in a battle group. The audience has noticed that he reports directly to Cawl in matters of medical maintenance and directly to Guilliman in matters of operations. There is no Astartes in the current Indomitus structure who has that reporting line, except for one. The hypothesis is that the reason there is no Astartes who has that reporting line is that Le.II is not, in the architecture that matters, an Astartes. Wait, pause on that, because that is the moment the audience usually skips past. Le.II is not, in the architecture that matters, an Astartes. He is wearing Astartes paperwork. He is walking through Astartes deployments. He is signed off on Astartes equipment. But the body underneath the paperwork is one order of magnitude up the scale. And Cawl knows it. And Guilliman is starting to suspect it. And the High Lords have not noticed because the paperwork is impeccable. That is the fragility of the cover. The paperwork holds because the paperwork was written by the man who knew exactly which Mechanicus formatting conventions would prevent it from being read closely. Cawl knew. Cawl wrote. The signature on the bottom of the designation document is the seal of an Archmagos Dominus,
which is the only Mechanicus signature whose audit chain runs through Mars exclusively. Terra cannot subpoena it without provoking a constitutional crisis that Terra cannot afford during a galactic war. So Terra signs the receipt. Terra puts Le.II in the supply manifest. Terra moves on. The cover holds as long as Cawl signs. The cover holds as long as Guilliman does not formally request the file. The cover holds as long as the political logic of another Primarch right now would crash the system continues to apply.
And the cover holds because every actor in the chain has a self-interest in not asking the question. Cawl does not want to be the Magos who said it. Guilliman does not want to be the brother who broke it. The High Lords do not want to know. The Custodes, if any of them have noticed, have decided not to act, because the Custodes' standing orders during the era of ruin are to preserve continuity. And the continuity preservation includes not opening boxes whose contents would shake the Regency. But the cover is fragile. The cover is one paragraph away from collapse. If, at any point in the next published Black Library novel, Guilliman is shown sitting across a table from Leetu, looking at his face, and asking the simple question, "Who were you before?" the cover breaks. And the moment after the cover breaks, the political crisis the cover was holding off begins. The Imperium does not get to ask, because the Imperium has not been told. But the audience has been told. By the body, by the labeling, by the reporting line, by the deference, by the silence. What this means for the Era of Ruin storyline going forward is that Black Library is sitting on a switch. The switch is whether Guilliman speaks the line that breaks the cover. Black Library has not yet had him speak it. The audience reads the omission as load-bearing. The omission is not editorial neglect. It is deliberate management of a reveal that has not yet been priced. When the reveal does come, the most likely framing is that Guilliman has been waiting for a specific political condition before he asks the question out loud, and the condition is the moment when the Indomitus Crusade can survive the answer. The condition has not yet arrived. The question has not yet been asked. The body keeps walking. And the audience of this channel, in the meantime, gets to read the ledger directly. The ledger says Le.II. The ledger says Primaris prototype, numbered second in series. The ledger says Cawl signed. The ledger does not say what the audience can read between the lines. The thesis the script ends on is the one the brief points to, but the brief does not commit. He already has. Guilliman has already read the document correctly. He is letting Cawl carry the lie because Cawl is the only actor in the Imperium whose institutional cover is dense enough to carry it. He is letting Leetu walk beside him because Leetu has nowhere else to go, and because Guilliman is the only brother left in the Indomitus order who could verify a body of that lineage and not have to lie about it. He is calling him brother because, on the only honest accounting, that is the word that fits. He is calling him brother because the deference is the only language available when the ledger says one thing and the heart says another. The Imperium has not been told. The Imperium will not be told until the political weather changes. The audience has been told now, in this video. And the audience now has the information to read every future Era of Ruin scene with the deference in mind. Every time Guilliman calls Leetu brother, in the next 10 years of Black Library publication, this is the reading underneath. Every time Cawl signs the Le.II maintenance order without looking up, this is what he is signing. Every time the editors flag the word and decline to explain it, this is the thing they are declining to explain. Robute Guilliman has fought beside Leetu for the entire Era of Ruin and has never once asked where he came from. He addresses him as brother in a way that Black Library editors have flagged but never explained. He looks at him with the same recognition without acknowledgement that he uses for objects whose names he is not permitted to say. Cawl's prototype paperwork says Leetu.
Cawl's prototype paperwork says it, because the alternative, to say second Primarch, would have ended the Indomitus Crusade in its first month. The Imperium does not get to be told. The audience of this channel has been told. The viewer can decide which Primarch's blood is walking beside Guilliman right now.